When my daughter Sabrina told me she was engaged to Trenton Whitmore, it wasn't the joy in her voice that struck me first. It was the calculation. She rattled off details about the Whitmore family's oceanfront property in Naples, the ski lodge in Aspen, the 5-star honeymoon she'd already envisioned, somewhere in that glittering list. I think she mentioned Trenton himself, but if she did, it was in passing. As though he were a stepping stone rather than the foundation, we were sitting in my modest kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only background to her glossy fantasy. She twirled the diamond on her finger, holding it just so the morning light would catch. "This is the start of something big, Mom," she said, her eyes bright but focused, like she could already see the front row of society luncheons waiting for her. I smiled, because that's what mothers do, but beneath it, there was a quiet ache. I remembered a different Sabrina one who used to talk about teaching English abroad, living in a small apartment with books stacked on the floor. That girl had vanished somewhere between Trenton's first invitation to the country club and the moment he slid that ring onto her hand. "You'll need to look the part," she added, glancing over my cardigan and flats. "For the engagement party, the Whitmores notice things. Wear something elegant. And please, don't bring up anything too small town. This is important." I nodded slowly, though the words felt like a boundary being drawn between us. She was stepping into a world that measured people by how they carried a wine glass, not by the warmth in their handshake. "I know how to behave," I said quietly. "It's not just about behaving, Mom. It's about fitting in. You don't get a second chance with people like them." Her tone was gentle, but the implication was firm. I was a risk. She stood, smoothing her silk blouse, already reaching for her phone to confirm the floral arrangements. I watched her go, her heels clicking against the tile, each step carrying her further from the girl I had raised, and somewhere between the diamond sparkle and the rustle of her designer skirt, I realized I wasn't just preparing for a party. I was bracing for a test I hadn't agreed to take. The day before the engagement party, Sabrina invited me over to her condo for what she called a quick prep session. I should have known better. By the time I arrived, there was a rack of borrowed evening dresses pushed up against one wall and a full-length mirror angled toward the best light. She handed me a champagne flute filled with sparkling water and motioned for me to sit. "We need to go over a few things," she began, her voice brisk, as if she were chairing a meeting. "The Whitmores are particular. They notice posture, manners, even how you greet them. Keep your shoulders back. Speak clearly. And this is important. Don't talk too much about yourself. Listen more. People respect restraint." I let her talk, hearing the edge in her voice that told me this wasn't just about me. It was about her fear that any misstep, mine or hers, would be magnified under the Whitmore gaze. She dressed her worry in the clothes of sophistication, but I could see the seams. "Also," she continued, flipping through a stack of glossy magazines on the coffee table, "avoid controversial topics. No politics, no religion, nothing sentimental. And for the love of God, don't get pulled into conversations with staff or with people who clearly don't belong there." Her eyes flicked to mine, testing for agreement. "What do you mean by don't belong?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She gave a light, dismissive laugh. "You know, people who can't even feed themselves. It's not our place to get involved." I could never be seen with someone like that. It sends the wrong message. I felt the comment land between us like a stone. I wanted to remind her that she once spent summers volunteering at the food pantry. But I bit my tongue. That was a different Sabrina. She moved on quickly, holding up a navy dress from the rack. "This one will work. Classic. Understated. It says you're respectable without trying too hard. I nodded and took the hanger from her, the fabric cool under my fingers. Tomorrow, I'd wear it for her. Tonight, I'd carry the weight of her words home with me. The morning before the engagement party, I left early to run a few errands. It would have been faster to take the bus straight to the shopping center, but my mind was restless and my feet needed to move. I decided to cut through the wealthiest part of town, a place where sidewalks gleamed as if polished, and iron gates guarded lawns trimmed within an inch of their lives. It was the kind of neighborhood Sabrina wanted to claim as her own, the kind where gardeners and delivery vans appeared like background actors, keeping the illusion perfect for the real stars. I walked slowly, absorbing the quiet that hung in the air like expensive perfume. That was when I saw her. She was sitting on a bench beneath a tree just outside the gates of a sprawling estate. Her coat was frayed at the cuffs, and her shoes had the slouched, weary look of years on the wrong kind of pavement. A thin scarf, more threadbare than warm, hung loosely around her neck. When I passed, she lifted her head. Her voice, though soft, carried the crisp edge of someone raised to speak carefully. "Excuse me," she said. "Would you happen to have anything to eat?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of Sabrina's lecture from the night before pressing at the back of my mind. But my hand was already moving to my bag, pulling out the sandwich I had packed for myself. "It's turkey and Swiss," I said, offering it to her. "It's not much, but it's yours if you'd like." Her fingers curled around the bread with surprising steadiness. "That's very kind of you," she replied, meeting my eyes. They were a striking, clear blue, not cloudy with age, but sharp, as though they missed nothing. I sat beside her for a moment, making small talk about the weather, the quiet street, the smell of the flowering trees. She listened politely, each response measured. When I rose to leave, she thanked me again. I walked away feeling oddly unsettled, as if I'd just been weighed on some invisible scale and found something. I had just stepped back from the bench, giving the woman space to eat, when I heard the sharp click of heels behind me. I turned and saw Sabrina, her hair swept into an immaculate chignon, flanked by two women about her age in fitted dresses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her eyes swept over the scene, me standing beside the old woman, my empty hands, the sandwich in the woman's lap, and her mouth tightened. "Mom," she said, her voice pitched high with disbelief. "What are you doing?" I opened my mouth to answer, but she was already turning toward her friends. "You see what I mean," she said to them, a laugh catching at the edge of her words. "She's out here playing street volunteer the day before the most important party of my life." The two women exchanged polite, confused smiles, as if unsure whether to laugh along or look away. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, not from shame, but from the way she'd chosen her audience. "I was just helping her," I said quietly. "She asked if I had any food." Sabrina's gaze flicked back to the woman on the bench, then to me, "And you gave it to her mom." "Seriously, you don't know where she's been. You don't know who's watching. Do you want people thinking we belong in that kind of company?" The words landed harder than I expected, sharp in their casual cruelty. I glanced at the old woman, wondering if she'd heard. She had stopped eating, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on Sabrina with a calm, steady attention. "Let's go," Sabrina said, already stepping past me, her friends falling into place beside her. "You should be at home, getting ready." "Not." She gestured vaguely toward the bench and didn't finish. I watched them walk away, their chatter fading into the hum of the quiet street. When I turned back, the old woman was still watching me, her expression unreadable, as though she'd just filed something away for later. By the time I got home that evening, Sabrina was already there, sprawled across my sofa like she owned it, a tablet balanced on her knees. The screen glowed with glossy images, yachts slicing through blue water, white sand beaches lined with umbrellas, dining tables set with more forks than I'd ever know how to use. "Trent's talking about taking me to the Amalfi Coast right after the wedding," she said without looking up. "And maybe St. Bart's for New Year's. I told him I want the honeymoon suite at every place we go. Oh, and I've already bookmarked this ski lodge in Aspen. You'll love it. Mom, you can visit us there in the winter." I hung my coat by the door, my mind still half on the quiet bench, and the woman I'd left there. "That sounds busy," I said, easing into the armchair. "It's called living," she replied, grinning. "First-class flights, Michelin star restaurants, no more worrying about bills or repairs. You know how many people would kill for this kind of future?" "I suppose plenty," I said. "But marriage isn't just about vacations and menus. Sabrina, it's about partnership, building something together." She waved her hand as if brushing away a gnat. "Mom, you've been stuck in that school librarian bubble too long. This is how people like the Whitmores live. It's not about scraping by, it's about enjoying life. And I'll be right there, part of it." Her voice was bright, but there was a current underneath, something sharp and restless. I thought of the way she had looked at the old woman earlier, the way her smile had turned brittle. "Do you love him?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up from the tablet, then back down again. "Of course. He's kind, he's generous, and he can give me everything I've ever wanted." I didn't press. The answer was already clear. Love was somewhere on her list, but it was written in smaller letters. Tucked between the private jet and the infinity pool, she kept scrolling, narrating each image as if she were flipping through the pages of a catalog for her future life. I listened, but my mind was elsewhere, on the measured politeness of a stranger's voice, the striking blue of her eyes, and the way she'd looked at my daughter without saying a word. Tomorrow, the Whitmores would host an engagement party that would set the tone for everything to come, and I had a feeling the real test wouldn't be mine to take. The Whitmore estate rose out of the manicured grounds like something from a postcard, white stone walls, high arched windows, and a sprawling terrace lined with potted citrus trees. Cars were valet parked in a seamless stream, their polished surfaces flashing under the midday sun. I stepped out of the sedan I'd taken from home and smoothed the navy dress Sabrina had chosen for me, hoping it would be enough to blend in. Inside, the air was cool and perfumed with a faint mix of roses and something more expensive that I couldn't name. Clusters of guests stood beneath ornate chandeliers, their conversations low and deliberate, punctuated by the occasional laugh that felt just a shade too practiced. I caught glimpses of glittering jewelry, tailored suits, and handbags that could have covered my rent for a year. Sabrina was across the room, framed by a group of men and women who looked as though they'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Her hand rested lightly on Trenton's arm as she tilted her head toward his friends, smiling with the kind of ease she had been rehearsing since the day they met. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, and chose not to break her rhythm. I lingered near a side table, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a passing server. A few people glanced my way, their eyes sliding over me as if measuring something: my dress, my posture, perhaps my right to stand in that room at all. I reminded myself to keep my shoulders back, just as Sabrina had instructed, though it felt less like confidence and more like armor. As I moved toward the terrace for some air, the weight of those glances seemed to follow me. Conversations would pause as I passed, then resume in tones too low to catch. It wasn't hostility, exactly more a quiet curiosity. The way one might regard a painting they weren't sure belonged in the gallery. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the far end of the terrace, a familiar figure in an emerald gown, speaking with a small knot of guests, even from a distance. I recognized the poise, the stillness, and something in the eyes that made me slow my steps. Trenton spotted me before I reached the terrace steps and crossed the space quickly. A polite smile fixed in place. "Clarissa," he said warmly, "there's someone I'd like you to meet." His hand was light on my elbow as he steered me toward the small circle of guests. At the center stood a woman in an emerald gown, the fabric catching the light like deep water. Her posture was effortless, her expression serene, and every person in that group seemed subtly arranged around her, as if she were the anchor holding them there. "Mother," Trenton said, "this is Clarissa Hale, Sabrina's mom." Margot Whitmore turned toward me, and in that instant, the terrace, the guests, even Trenton's voice fell away. The striking blue eyes I had seen on the park bench the day before met mine with the same steady clarity. Gone was the frayed coat, the thin scarf, the shiver in her shoulders. She stood tall, composed, her presence filling the space without effort. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hale," she said, her voice warm but deliberate, each word measured. I returned the greeting, matching her tone, my mind scrambling to reconcile the two images: the woman who had accepted my sandwich with quiet gratitude and the one now commanding the attention of an entire terrace. For a brief moment, her gaze held mine, and something passed between us. Recognition? Certainly. Gratitude? Maybe, but she didn't acknowledge it aloud. Instead, she turned slightly, introducing me to the others with the same ease she might have used to describe a piece of art. We spoke only briefly polite pleasantries about the weather, the beauty of the venue before another guest claimed her attention, but as I stepped back, I caught her watching me, her expression unreadable, as though she were still deciding exactly where I fit in her carefully arranged picture. The soft clink of a spoon against glass cut through the hum of conversation. I turned to see Margot standing near the head of the room, a microphone in one hand, her posture straight and unshakable. The guests gathered, their murmurs fading into a silence laced with anticipation. She began warmly, thanking everyone for joining to celebrate what was meant to be the beginning of a new chapter for her family. She spoke with practiced grace, her smile measured, her voice carrying easily over the crowd. But then her tone shifted subtle at first, then undeniable. "Before we go further," she said, her gaze sweeping the room, "I must speak plainly. The Whitmore family has always valued character above all else. Wealth without respect is a house with no foundation, and I will not see such a house built under my name." A ripple of unease moved through the guests. I felt my breath catch, though I wasn't sure why until her eyes fixed briefly on me before moving to Sabrina. "It has come to my attention," she continued, "that the young woman meant to join our family does not honor her own mother, and a person who cannot show respect to the one who gave them life will not respect the family they marry into, nor the legacy they inherit." Gasps and whispers filled the air. I saw Sabrina's face pale, the perfect gloss of her lipstick suddenly too bright against her skin. Margot's expression softened when she turned back to me. In contrast, I have witnessed an act of simple, selfless kindness from this woman, one that speaks louder than any title or bank account ever could. That is the character I wish to see in my family. She stepped back from the microphone. The engagement is canceled, for a heartbeat. The room stood frozen. Then the murmurs began again, low and sharp, as Sabrina's eyes darted around, searching for an escape from the weight of 100 stares. When the last of the guests had drifted out and the echo of their whispers faded, I slipped toward the back hallway. eager to find a quiet exit. Before I reached the door, Margot appeared, her emerald gown still flawless, her expression softer now. "Mrs. Hale," she said, beckoning me toward a smaller sitting room. "Would you join me for a cup of tea?" I hesitated, but followed her inside. The space was warm and intimate, a contrast to the grandeur of the main hall. She poured the tea herself, setting a delicate china cup in front of me. "I have a habit," she began, "of stepping outside my name and fortune. Sometimes I walk through the world as someone invisible, to see how people behave when they believe no one of influence is watching." She smiled faintly. "Yesterday, I was that old woman on the bench." I nodded, already certain. "I thought you looked familiar." I said, "I wanted to see the truth of the woman my son might marry into the family." She continued, "But it wasn't Sabrina who showed me anything worth keeping. It was you." Her words settled between us, heavy, but warm. We talked then about raising children, about the difficulty of holding on to values in a world obsessed with status. She listened as intently as she spoke, her sharp blue eyes softening when she laughed. By the time we finished our tea, there was an ease between us I hadn't expected. Not the shallow politeness of strangers, but the steady comfort of shared ground. She walked me to the door herself, her arm brushing mine lightly. "I think," she said, "we will be seeing more of each other." In the weeks that followed, Sabrina moved through a storm of emotions. At first, she was furious at me, at Margot, at the way the engagement had ended so publicly. She avoided my calls, choosing silence over confrontation. But slowly, the edges of her anger began to dull. One afternoon, she showed up at my door, hair pulled back, makeup minimal. She told me she'd taken a job at a local marketing firm, her first in years. It wasn't glamorous, but she said it was hers. Something she could stand on without anyone's last name propping her up. She didn't apologize outright, but the way she lingered in the doorway before leaving told me she was trying. Margot and I saw each other often. She invited me to luncheons and community fundraisers, not as a showpiece, but as a partner. We stood side by side at food drives and literacy events, discovering that our shared values extended far beyond the moment on the park bench. She had a way of making me feel that my presence mattered, not for how I looked or who I knew, but for what I did. I thought often about that day before the party, the walk, the sandwich, the decision to stop despite the clock ticking toward an important event. It had felt small in the moment, almost forgettable, but it had revealed the truth about everyone in its path. My daughter's hunger for status, Margot's quiet tests of character, and my own stubborn belief that kindness is never wasted. Sabrina still has a long road ahead, but I've stopped trying to script it for her. My life is full enough with work I love, a friend I never expected, and the knowledge that sometimes losing the life you wanted is the only way to discover the life you need.